Good afternoon. Sorry once again for we just had a little technical difficulty, but like I've said before, it is a pleasure to be in your homes on a Thursday afternoon. I know that you have other things that you can do, but I appreciate you finding time to just tune into Let's Talk TCI Real Estate as we speak about all things real estate in the Turks and Caicos Islands. As I've mentioned before, please like and share the page as my guests and I, we will be talking about some of the recommendations from the Crown Land Review that was had just been conducted recently, right? I also started to say that, the review documentation is about 308 pages long. Therefore, if you have not had an opportunity to read it, I'm sure you can go on the government website and you will be able to find a copy of it. If not, I do have a copy obviously on my Facebook page, which is Real Estate with Vernica Delancey. I think it's something worth taking a look at just so you can see what have been discussed and you can have an idea of what are the recommendations that are being put forward to the government for review and consideration. I just want to say before we get any further, so definitely I would like to say that thank you so much to my guest for being with me on the show. My guest today obviously is no stranger to anyone in the Turks and Caicos Islands. I'm sure he has touched base with all of the homes within the Turks and Caicos Islands. He is a well-known person, and I continue to say in the Turks and Caicos Islands because he's not just focused on one island, but he is well known in all of the islands in the Turks and Caicos chain. He's also a minister of religion, but he is also a former minister in this Turks and Caicos Islands. And without any further delay, I would say welcome Honorable Clarence Salva to the show, and I will give you this opportunity to say hello to those who are listening out there.
Yeah, thank you very much. And it's indeed a pleasure to join you here this afternoon as we take a look at just some of the recommendations that has been put forward with the Crown Land policy. And well, as she said, my name is Clarence Silver, and I am a Turks and Caicos Islander. Worked in the private sector, the banks, and other places. And I was Minister of Health, Education, Youth and Sports, Gender Affairs for about 8 years, 2 terms. And so I come with a wealth of experience in the private sector as well as in government on what is going on here in the Turks and Caicos Islands. And I, would like to use this opportunity to join my host in, weighing in on some of the issues. So it's a pleasure being here once again.
Thank you. Definitely, you are well versed when it comes to local and national issues within the Turks and Caicos Islands, and that's why I felt like it was really fitting to have you on to discuss this topic today. This is, I think, a hot button topic that is going around right now because it affects us all as a people in the Turks and Caicos Islands. So thanks once again for being here with me. And to the listening audience, I just would like to say, the Crown Land Review has touched a number of areas. Some of those areas are inclusive of, they spoke about the future allocation of Crown Land. I know that's something that we have always been thinking about. Existing conditional purchase lease agreement. Of course, this is for us who actually have CPLs with the government. Unauthorized occupation of land. There's also recommendations on the Crown Land Unit, and this is about, obviously, should it remain with the Attorney General's chambers or should it be directed under a minister? Those are some of the things that are discussed within that recommendation. Also supporting mortgage opportunities, and also about improving the process of how Crown Land is distributed within the Turks and Caicos Islands. And I know that that has been a sore topic for a lot of people over the past years. Now, there are other recommendations that have come out of this whole review process, but I was just touching on those few points, and that's why it's so important to take a look at this document if you haven't done so beforehand. But today, like we've said, we're going to touch just a few issues. It's impossible to touch all of the issues. Now, I want to just jump right in by asking the honorable. As I was reading the policy, one of the first things that stood out to me was, and I'm going to call page numbers just because if you are reviewing this broadcast at a later date, then you could also follow along with us by pulling up the policy and checking all these pages. Only because, like I said, the document is very long. So what one of the things that touch base with me was on page 16, where there were statistics about the amount of crown land that is currently within the Turks and Caicos Islands. And basically, this document is stating that there's overall 23% of crown land that is left within the islands, and it actually breaks it down. What is your thoughts about this whole issue and about the amount of crown land that is available?
Um, you're correct in saying that this is a hot topic. Regardless to what we're going to do in this country or anywhere, you need land. And here in, for instance, Providencia Alice, this is where most of the growth is taking place and where the highest demand for, especially residential land, is being made. And sad to say, when I look at this chart, Providenciales has about 20% of the crown land left, and 80% of the land is in private hands.
Right.
Now, of that 20%, there is going to be a lot of pressure on government in what they do with this 20%. And I know for a fact that a number of Turks and Caicos Islanders, they feel like over the past few years they have been marginalized in their attempt to acquire some land, especially young people who
Right.
just got married, or even if they weren't married, but they want to, build their own homes or do a development. Because especially right now, there is a big drive right now to get into the rental market.
Correct.
So while it is lucrative and it is still, something desirable, it would be good if young people who have the means, the financial means, could have the ability to acquire some land. And I was talking with a gentleman this morning who is blessed with having quite a bit of land, but he said he has a son who wanted to do a project on his own, and he didn't want to come to his daddy to get some of his daddy's land.
Right.
And he looked around, and the cheapest piece of land he could have found for the purpose for which he wanted to do his development was 160,000. So it's telling you whether you take 160,000, sink it in the property, what you can build with.
Yeah.
So this is the kind of dilemma that Turks and Caicos Islanders, younger people, well, persons like myself, trying to get into that rush is behind me, But it's a real issue
Yes.
for young people because some of my children are caught up in this.
Right.
They are young adults and they want to, get out on their own, but the land isn't there. So this is a big issue here in Provo, and it's going to escalate. As more and more of the population begins to expand, people are going to be looking for land for residential purposes, and government policy has to address itself to how they move forward. They have to do something, make lots smaller, or allow people to go up higher, whatever it takes, but something the practical is going to have to be put in place to accommodate the pressure that people are going to be exerting
Right.
to get accommodation.
Right.
But sad to say, it's not a good picture.
Right. When I took a look at it, that's why it was so interesting to me when I started reading some of the recommendations, because I think a lot of this recommendation is based on how to deal with such shortage of government land, because now everybody still wants a piece of the pie, like you said. And like you say, young folks like myself, we're thinking about what we're going to do. So that's why going through this whole document was really eye-opening for me as to some of the recommendations and suggestions. But one of the things I also thought about as I looked at this, where it says that North Caicos only have 2% of crown land.
Yes.
You know, I saw that there's a bigger percentage of private land. And most of that, what came to mind more so was a lot of generational property.
Yes.
And I feel like that's the case, and I feel like, you know, that's an indication for those in North Caicos to probably, I can be wrong about this, but I think the majority of it is generational land versus other private persons coming in and purchasing. And I just feel that way from being in the real estate sector and seeing that the movement on North Caicos was not so great as in Provo, and most of the properties, even when we had a property to sell, it all derived from generational property. That's an indication to me for those who have generational property. I think that's a good thing in a way that they can, to say that they still hold the wealth of the country in their hands, and they just need to use that opportunity to their advantage and to make opportunities for them, not taken away from government providing land for the people of Turks and Caicos Islands. But when I saw that specifically in North Caicos, that's what I thought about, and they could really dictate the way how things are, develop within the islands, and there will be, I think, much more opportunity for residents of North Caicos and thereabout. That's how I thought about that part about it.
Yeah, if I might just make a comment on that. I think you are correct in what you were saying about the land holdings over there, that the basis of it lies within some generational plots.
Right.
And having said that, I know from experience that a number of families, the individual members, they would like to acquire their portion
Right.
of this land. But the fact is, sometimes the persons who hold the papers, so to speak, and they have the power of attorney or whatever to apply the government to make subdivisions and to subdivide the land.
Right.
Some of them have no interest in doing that. And they have their siblings, they're languishing, waiting for their piece of land to do a development. I think in some cases, there is also the will to do it, but they lack the financial resources wherewith to go through all of the process of applying and getting it surveyed and subdivided. Some of them don't have it. And I think this is where probably the government might be able to step in if they could set up a help desk for persons in this area where they could assist these people in putting this stuff together. And at some point in time, government might be able to recoup the cost of this exercise, maybe on the sale
Right.
of the land or some of it, so that government wouldn't be seeing to be putting in human resources into getting this thing to the point where it has been subdivided and have the individual plot numbers, and government is left with nothing.
Right.
But I think government need to look at how they could assist these persons in getting these properties to a place where it is subdivided and it is available for development, whether by the individuals themselves or maybe through sale. And
Right.
then the subsequent buyer would proceed with doing some development. But this is certainly an area that I think the government
Can look into.
need to probably look into.
Right. That's a valid point. So another question I have, I'm just looking at page 32 of the recommendation, and it's recommendation 4 that says that the government should be given the explicit power in the Crown Land Ordinance to develop affordable housing, low rent housing, social housing, and emergency shelter on Crown land, right? So basically giving the government the right to be able to develop affordable housing. Again, when we're talking about the shortage of land, I guess this is just what this is how I'm thinking about that. There is a shortage of housing in the Turks and Caicos Islands. And a lot of times people purchase land, or people may acquire land even from government or the private sector. And then it's difficult to develop these land. So I am thinking that this suggestion came about because of this, where government will use some of this land to, actually put up housing that they can put their people in. What are you thinking about this? What do you think?
Um, I don't think that the government should remove its ability to go into that area of providing housing stock if it sees that as necessary, right? So I would agree that they should retain that right to be able to go into that and into other areas. For instance, uh, when I was in government, I wanted to develop a 50-room hotel, all right, which would have been assigned to the community college, okay, and I was given. I mean, the land was approved for it, not in
Right.
my name, but it was allocated there for the purpose of that development, where we do a sports complex and a hotel. The hotel would be there for the community college. Students who are in hospitality studies, they would go there and do their practical.
Right.
And they would have guests coming in, like how this big boom now. Can you imagine the amount of money that would have been generated through that source? But it was there, it was a good idea. But the successive government take the land and give it away. They didn't buy into, they didn't, that wasn't a vision for them.
Right.
They wanted money, or they wanted to give this land to their friends and so on and so forth. But government should always be looking to see how they could uh, create new revenue streams. And
Right.
that would have been a new revenue stream. So if going into housing, but I think that we need a vehicle. We need a legal vehicle that could actually purchase land and hold it, you know, uh, go into housing development, and it'd be like a statutory board,
Okay.
you know, but it would have the legal authority to deal in land. And I think if we have something like that, some places have like housing trust and so on
Right.
and so forth that would assist their population in acquiring houses and other real estate investment. But we need to have something similar to that being created here in the Turks and Caicos Islands, so that we could move into that area and people will realize, okay, this here is a project that has been developed through this housing trust. I need a place to rent. You go and you rent it, but you realize you got to pay a rent because, hey, this ain't government stuff where it's freebie,
Right.
so you have some sort of control over and proper management. What is lacking now in government is the enforcement
Right.
and the monitoring of what is going on. But if you have something set up like that, where you got to go pay your bills, or they set up standing orders where, you know, your payments come direct, there will be more control. And I think the government needs to see how they could set up better controls to be able to collect what is due to them, and also to provide what the people need. And right now, housing is one area, affordable housing is one area that is seriously lacking, particularly here at Providenciales.
Right. So I just want to say, so basically, being able to use not all of it, but a portion of the crown land to develop affordable housing. Um, and I'm just saying, I just want to clarify, are you saying that this should be allowed, or it should be just through just private partnership with someone that the government probably get into it with?
Um, the government depends on the scale,
Right.
right, of the development. But if government, for instance, with all of this revenue that is coming in, if they, for instance, take X millions of dollars a year, right, and put it aside in a subvention,
Right.
and it goes into a fund, and from that fund, it is used to develop so many houses.
Right.
So government on an annual basis could decide, well, okay, from this allocation, we are able to do 50 houses for this year,
Right.
right? And so you wouldn't have to necessarily go and involve private sector,
Okay.
because you would be able to be billing in an orderly manner based on what your revenue is generating. But if things get kind of sticky, maybe you might look for a private partner.
Right. Okay. Right. All right. So the next one I have is on page 285. Were a few recommendations on recommendation number 11, and it actually there's a few. I'll just read it out, but there were three that I was hoping that we can touch base on. So it says basically that the government commit to efficient use of residential crown land by one, considering encouragement of residential development through annual tax on undeveloped residential land. We're going to go back over it, but I just want to read that out. Considering encouragement of residential development by providing better infrastructure where doing so in a specific location would increase uptake. Number three, prioritizing infill developments in existing residential subdivisions. Number four, prioritizing turnkey housing, particularly multifamily housing and multi-unit accommodation. The other one is setting higher density zoning for residential crown land. And the last one will be exercising restraint in the size of undeveloped crown land plots that are offered for a single family house. So there are three of them I really specifically want to touch base on. The first one, which speaks about considering encouragement of residential development through annual tax on undeveloped residential land. What is your take on this particular point about annual tax on undeveloped residential land?
Um, I think what the government is trying to do is to coerce persons in the category that we mentioned earlier, who have generation land or vast tracts of land in their personal name, to coerce them into either selling or developing the land,
Right.
and not to say hold the land to give to their grandchildren or their children, as the case might be.
Right.
Um, I I don't agree with this. I'll give you a scenario. Let's say you know Je- uh, the Parker family, for instance, might have 100 acres of land, generation land, and the government introduce a tax, 10%, right, of the value,
Right.
right? You have to pay that over, right, into government as a tax. So you got 100,000. So you got 10%. That's 10,000. Okay. So the government billed them $10,000 on this property. They don't have it. A real estate man come to them and say, "Listen, I know this government now putting up this tax, and do you have the money?" No. Okay. Do you mind selling 10 acres of this land to raise some money, put in your pocket, and then you could pay a tax? It sounds like a good idea. So you sell 10 acres, right?
Right.
The person who buys it is a wealthy person. They put a very, very large scale development there, high end. And that development is success at, let's say, $200 million, right? So all of a sudden, the 90 acres of land that is left, when it comes for tax time, is revalued, because right on the boundary, you got this $200 million project there.
Right.
So when the assessment come around, it is X, it valued this amount, and 10%. You ain't got it.
Right.
You went Miami last year, blew the first money you had. So what you do? Sell another 10 acres to pay the tax. And anyway, to cut a
Right.
long story short, year by year, unless something happens where they could actually do some development and to be able to pay the tax on the increased value,
Right.
they will lose all of their land holdings,
Right.
and they'll see other people occupying it.
Okay.
That's the danger.
When I read this, I was thinking, I understand where you're coming from, but I was also thinking two things I was thinking about. First of all, this whole policy is about crown land. So then I was wondering if this only applied, because in your example, you spoke about it's more like private land that, even if it's generational land. So I was wondering if this was specific to just crown land that was obtained by residents within the island. So that was one of the things. I guess it's a little bit ambiguous for me, and that's why I was just trying to figure out into what context. And also then if it's only applying to, if this is only on crown land that have been acquired, then of course that means it's just for residents. But if it's not just on crown land, but this law is about even private land, then I was thinking, okay, if this is the case, perhaps there will be some concession when it comes to non-residents versus residents. So those were the thoughts that were coming in my mind when I read it. I wasn't quite sure, like, if this was just specific crown land or not.
I think this is a point that the country and all interested citizens of the Turks and Caicos Islands need to bend the ears of the government and to get them to be quite clear on this point, right? Is this tax going to be applied to crown land? But you see, the thing, you put it on crown land, remember the people are paying rents already for crown land, even though they ain't developed it yet. Or is this, or are we looking at people who have acquired the freehold title?
Right.
Okay? But this, the way how this is written, needs further clarification.
Right.
Because I can't see them introducing a tax to tax land that used to be fully crowned. It is now on a freehold being held by somebody, and because they didn't develop it, you're going to tax just them. What about the other persons who have land that they purchased from a private sector and
Right.
they're holding it and not doing any development? You
Right.
cannot have that sort of unfair application of a law in a
Right.
country. If you're going to tax undeveloped land, you have to tax all undeveloped land.
Right.
Now, as you say, if you might have a preferential rate for a Turks and Caicos Island as opposed to one held by foreigner, well, you might be able to do that. But
Right.
we need further clarification on this.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it needs further clarification. Right. The other point in here, they setting higher density zones for residential crown land. Now I know that this is something that was proposed during the National Development Plan when they did it for the country. This was just across the board for all land. They had changed up some of the zonings and increased some of the densities for land in specific area. So setting high density zoning for residential crown land, I feel personally, I mean, for me, I feel like it's a good suggestion because if I acquire a piece of crown land now, I'm not just restricted to putting a dwelling home or anything on it, but because if the density is increasing, that allows me, I'm just using an example, to probably put a few apartments on it that I can also generate income, and it's not just specific to me residing on that property and in that house. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, for years, we, when I say we, my
Right.
wife and myself, were of the view that government have been allocating too large tracts of land for residential purposes.
Right.
Some people were given acre and a half to build a house, and that was, you're behaving as if there was a vast amount of land that there was no end to,
Right.
right? But now we know that that isn't the case. So what they have left, they should look at making smaller plots. And people who have those 1 acre, if they want to do a further subdivision of it, they should be allowed to say do 0.25 or so and probably make 4 lots
Right.
out of an acre. You know, so I agree with this approach that we should look at higher density and probably smaller lots in some areas.
Right. Well, right now, like I mentioned before, right now I think it's a need for it. Just being in the real estate sector, everybody needs an income source.
Yes.
And just having a property for your dwelling home, it's not working because if you have to go to the bank and acquire a mortgage on that property or when you build that house, it makes no sense just being able to build a house because you still can't pay that mortgage or do anything else. So, yeah. Right. Um, is there anything else about that recommendation segment that you would like to talk about? Because there were a few points there, but those were the two that I really wanted to point out.
Um,
That's on recommendation 11. Yeah.
yeah, well, when I mean, reverting to the tax issue, I think by imposing a tax, there would be no control over who buys the land. You know, if you force somebody to sell, and I think the government should now be looking at trying to encourage Turks and Caicos Islanders who are in dire need of a piece of land to be in a stronger position to be able to acquire a piece of land. And but again, I don't see how imposing the tax would make it easier for a Turks and Caicos Islander to acquire some land.
Right.
So I, really don't see much point in that.
Right. Well, like we've said before, that's why something like this really requires further clarification. Right. I think the terminology is a little bit ambiguous, and we need further clarification to make a more informed decision about how we really feel about that recommendation. Okay. So recommendation number 12 that says the islander discount on undeveloped residential land should be increased to 50%. That's on page 51. So let me just make sure I read it correctly. Yes, the islander discount on undeveloped residential land should be increased to 50%. So apparently it seems like islander discount was previously set at 25%. So now they're going to be increasing it to 50%.
This is an area that I think sometimes government has to look at the social benefit and not just look at acquiring a residential plot, look at the revenue that they would generate from the sale of the land. Trying to house a poor family should have some sort of priority, because those children, when they become adult, hopefully they will be contributing to the ongoing development of this country. And shelter is a basic need.
Right.
And so, the government really should do all in its power. When we were in office, for instance, over there in North Caicos, there was a policy where persons who lived on Crown land, either they didn't have a lease or they had an expired lease, we came up with a policy where they would pay $144 an acre, right? So if they was on 0.25 of an acre, they end up paying $60 or $50 for their freehold title. but they've been living there all their life, you see?
Right.
But that was a special policy for those people who live in those rural areas all their life and they didn't have title. But government at the time we were there had a discount of 75%
Right.
for residential and 50% for
For
commercial.
commercial.
Okay, and subsequent in subsequent years, governments decide to claw back some of that 75%. It went down to 25%. Now they're going to try to push it up now to 50%. Um, any amount that you make available to Turks and Caicos Islanders is a good thing. But when you look at 50% of what,
Right.
okay? When land was valued at $20,000, 50%, 10 grand, a person could afford it.
Right.
Now land at $100,000, 50%, $50,000. How many could come up with $50,000? And you have a limited time frame in which to exercise that option. So it's good to get the discount, but when it comes down to it, we have to see how many Turks and Caicos Islanders in this environment would be able to make good of acquiring a piece of land, even at 50%.
Right.
So we have to look at other ways of how we will empower Turks and Caicos Islanders and to assist them in acquiring land for shelter for residential purposes. But the 50%, I'm not going to knock it. It's better than the 25, you know. And they also would get rid of the back rents too.
So yeah, from the recommendations I'm reading that yeah, all back rents will be taken away, as well as there's still the stamp duty portion. You won't have to pay any stamp duty on the purchase when you make the freehold purchase. So that's also helping with acquiring the freehold title.
Yeah.
Right. Let me ask you this question. You mentioned about how land was done as you were saying $100 and something per
$144 an acre.
per acre. In reading this, I didn't get to read all of it completely, but I saw where that was also part of a recommendation. Instead of doing it based on instead of valuing land based on market value, I saw that there was some talks about a suggestion doing it based on a sat or flat fee, I guess, in per the size of the lot. Do you feel like that's just like you said it was before? Did you think that worked at that time? Do you think it will be
Oh yeah.
beneficial versus market value?
Well,
Yeah.
yes. I mean, the thing is, government in those rural areas was able to regularize a lot of the residents who took up the offer and applied. So, you know, it wasn't so much of a revenue raiser,
Right.
but you have persons now who legally are occupying a piece of land, you know, they have freehold title to it. Now they could will that or do it as a deed, a gift to one of
Right.
their children or grandchildren. So it was a whole better, you know, system after they were able to acquire the freehold title. So if they want to go down that road, I think it is worth exploring.
Yeah, just as I'm thinking about it, in doing real estate, most times when we're valuing a property, of course, it's based on market value and what have been sold. I mean, I'm not sure. I'm not a professional appraiser or evaluator. How would they come up with that figure? To know what's a qualifying figure that it would not that it will be fair straight across the board when you're thinking about, because there are so many different income levels even with us as Turks and Caicos Islander, to know what's fair to have such a flat fee per acre at, seeing that there's no data to support it.
Well, I think it would be up to the technocrats to go and do their investigation
Right.
and to see what the people could bear, you know. But in all you do, you have to look out for those who are most vulnerable among you,
Right.
that, you know, there's a seat for them at the table too.
Yes.
Not just those who got, you know, the hundreds of thousands of dollars, and acquiring a piece of land is no problem. Uh, you know, everybody needs to, as a Turks and Caicos Islander, should have a piece of the Turks and Caicos,
Yeah.
you know, for a residential purpose.
Right. But you say that, I don't remember seeing this in the document. Of course, like I said, it's 308 pages. So I haven't read all of it. I've read a lot of it, but all of it. But, just thinking about having a piece of land for all Turks and Caicos Islanders. I remember being, when they did have the meeting at the Gustavus, I think one of the questions that was asked, and I can't remember what's the response that was given, but there are a number of Turks and Caicos Islanders who already have crown land. Some people have more than one, right? Do you think that this is just me saying, do you think that they should be actually qualified for what's left of the crown land?
Um, you see, this comes down to a government being direct, being certain as to what they're going to do, and not be afraid to bell the cat. Okay? If somebody already had one or two pieces of crown land, there isn't any more crown land being created anywhere.
Right.
So the remainder should, persons who never had, should be given preference, you know, and persons who already had crown land, they you know, they should be encouraged to look in the private sector if they want to buy land. But government should, you know, at the very least, try to ensure that as far as possible, persons who need a piece of land, they are given an opportunity
Right.
to acquire a piece of land or get a lease or something over it while there is still some, and not to you know, bend into to the dictates of persons who already have land.
Yes.
You know, come on, you know, you have to be a brother's keeper, and government is there to look after everyone,
Yeah.
and not to have a policy that would give certain
Some, right.
persons two dips, and the other person can't get one dip,
Right.
you know. So
And like you said, there's residential and commercial land. I think everyone is entitled to both, but at the same time, I feel like with the commercial land, I think it should be a different process that, if I'm going to use it and develop it for the purpose of, doing business or whatever, then yes, but not that every Turks and Caicos Island is entitled, like to say, I've already applied for residential, now I'm going to apply for commercial just because I have the benefit to apply.
well, of course, the requirements for the commercial is a bit steeper, but they're all at 50% now, huh? Discount?
Well, I don't know if it's at a 50% discount because I haven't read that as well. But I was just generally speaking because
Yeah.
I know that was just a spin off from the question I asked because I know that was a concern where some people felt like they should have, they're entitled to a piece of each, even if they're not utilizing it.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, with the scarcity of land,
Right.
I think what government probably should be looking at is giving some sort of attention to groups of Turks and Caicos Islanders who might form a company, right? 10 of them form a company, whether they are in water sports or are they in real estate or development or whatever,
Right.
right? 10 of them in this company, and they apply for 2 acres of land to do a development. Well, those sorts of arrangements probably should be encouraged because once it gets going,
Right.
you have 10 individuals who would benefit from, the profits,
Correct.
as opposed to one individual.
Right.
So I think maybe that is an area that probably the government could look at, given some sort of preference or encouragement to persons who come, and of course the government would vet all of
Candidates.
the
Yeah.
candidates to make sure that they're bona fide,
Right.
and then approve the project, and then give them the land, and let them go on with their development.
Right.
But that's, as I said, it's
Yes.
just an idea.
Yeah, no, definitely. Us talking today is just about suggestions or that we think about as we, sift through a few of these recommendations that were given. None of these are set in stone, but at the same time, our voice can be heard as to what we are thinking about these policies. So I just want to say out there to all those who are listening, again, definitely today my guest is Honorable Clarence Selva, and we are talking about some of the recommendations that were given based on the Crown Land Review that was recently done. And again, I'm encouraging you, if you did not have an opportunity to go through the document, please find some time. It's for your benefit, so you can know what's happening with Crown Land in the Turks and Caicos Islands.
While you're on the document, I noticed, on my computer that, it's quite a number of pages. But I think somewhere in the summary, I see where they have the recommendations summarized somewhere in the back.
Yeah, there are some recommendations at the front and at the back, yes.
Yeah. So I would recommend for those who want to read, if you don't have time to read all of it, at least find the recommendations. Read the recommendations, and then if you want to see how they arrive at it, well, the information is just ahead of the recommendation.
Yes.
So you could better acquaint yourself as to how they arrived at it. But go ahead, the recommendations first.
Yes, I agree with that. Yes. Okay, so we have about two more questions, and again, if you have any comments, please feel free to put it in the comments section. So on page 62, there is recommendation number 17, and it basically states that the CPL should not be reintroduced. Turnkey housing or starter homes and rentals should be the priority for those people still unable to afford undeveloped land, even with the benefit of the islander discount, right? Right, so, sorry. CPL should not be reintroduced. Turnkey housing starter homes should be the priority for those people still unable to afford undeveloped land, even with the benefit of the discount. And just some of the reading to the recommendations, some of the comments were that it's been a consistent experience that a large portion of leaseholders have not paid rent due to the lease, and government has not taken steps, like you say, to really enforce these rent payments. And also, it has been consistent experience that a large portion of leaseholders have not completed the agreed level of construction within an agreed time frame that is required by the lease. And there was one other comment here I wanted to read, that after many years of holding a lease and then continuing to view the land as belonging to the individual, during which some works have been undertaken on the land, it is inevitable that the individual develops a connection and a sense of ownership of the plot. So basically, in just reading some of this, is I guess this suggestion came up basically because after someone has acquired a piece of government land, they still don't have the means of developing the land, and so I guess that's why they're suggesting that about turnkey housing, homes and rentals should be a priority for people who are still unable to afford undeveloped land with the benefit of the islander discount.
Yeah, well, the thing is, access to financing, okay, that is the big issue for many Turks and Caicos Islanders. And I read in this document with interest that all of the bankers claims that they are not biased against Turks and Caicos Islanders who apply for a mortgage. They treat a Turks and Caicos Islander equal with a foreigner um, if they apply for a mortgage. But some people feel like they might have been unfairly dealt with
Right.
by the banks, because you might be on a job, me and you working at the same place. I want one of those homes down at first phase or second phase.
Right.
I apply for financing. I don't get it. You come from overseas. You apply. You
Right.
get it. And I got to rent from you. You know, those sorts of things, it is somewhat glaring. But, it, whether or not the banks feel they have been discriminating, a lot of people, because of their um, experience,
Right.
feel like they have been discriminated against, especially when they see one of their colleagues who make round about the same money. They could get financing, but they can't.
Yes.
So, but it is a big issue. Now, to move away from CPL,
Right.
I don't quite agree with it. Now, maybe things need to be set up with more controls, right? If government wants to ensure they get their revenue, the money lenders, if you want to go borrow $1,000 now, they can make sure get you sign up all the papers where they could go take it to your boss, right? And let your boss sign off on it. At a such and such a time, you transfer so much of this guy's salary to me. Okay? What is wrong with government doing such a thing like that? Where people have a standing order, when they do the payroll, X amount of money goes to the government for your CPL, you know? And government, they will only have to be matching it to make sure that, that
Right.
the money is being applied towards the freehold or whatever.
Right.
Um,
Can I just say something?
yes.
It's a good idea, but then what about some persons who are not employed? So then that same standard can be applied to their CPL.
Well, um, well, the truth of the matter is, it's a hard thing. But I think in some cases, government gonna have to do some social development. By that I mean, persons who are unemployed, whether because of disability or whatever, they need shelter.
Right.
So government might have to develop a turnkey community
Right.
and give people a place to stay until they die, and then it reverts to government.
Right.
Government could then put somebody else in it, you know. But no, there are some people who would never be able to
Right.
develop land,
Yeah.
and it's a fact.
Yeah.
But at the same time, they need shelter.
Right. Well, I guess, like you said, this is just back to providing turnkey housing for some, using a portion of the land to do such things for persons who need that shelter
Yeah.
and is not able to do so on their own. Yeah.
Yeah, but like I say earlier,
Yeah.
maybe the government needs to develop some sort of housing trust that
Right.
would be in charge of these land holdings and have the power to lease them out or, maintain them or whatever,
Right.
so that, people just don't go there or break up the place. Somebody's keeping an eye on it.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I think I have one last recommendation that I would like for us to. Oh, sorry, so many papers. One last recommendation I would like for us to touch base on. I think that's recommendation number 20. We may have touched on this a little bit, but it's saying that on the purchase of freehold or residential crown land claim under the expired CPL. So this is when the CPL has actually expired. The rule requiring reevaluation at an open market. So we've touched on this a little bit. Value at the time of applying for the freehold should remain, but that all rents, arrears, and Profits due to the government on the land should be written off in the event of a successful application to purchase within 2 years of the new reforms coming into force. And that section 36.3 of the Crown Land Ordinance should be amended accordingly. That a 50% island discount should be applied in these cases, whether or not the rate also applies to future allocations with no preceding CPL, and that there should be no stamp duty on the freehold purchase in the case. So this was something that we spoke about earlier. But just if you have a CPL with the government, and if it has expired, now when it's time for that person to go and, well, I guess extend this CPL, but what they're saying is that the rule that requires a revaluation on the open market at the time of applying should remain. But even though they're allowing it to remain at market value, that again, like we say, they will do away with all arrears that that person would have had.
Right.
They will give them a 50% discount, and of course, they would not allow any payment of any stamp duties on these leases when it turns to freehold purchase.
I understand, the government coming up with a further grace period of 2 years in which the person could exercise that option to buy the freehold. This, I think few people would be able to take it up, all right? Because you're looking at 50%. 50% of the revised value, revaluation amount.
Right.
And so you have to pay that one lump sum, because I don't think they give you a period of time. You have 2 years, right? So I don't know whether they would take payments
In installments.
in installments, or you have to wait until you get your 50% and you go in and say, here is my 50% for the freehold. I now want the freehold. I'm not sure how it will work,
Right.
but in any case, the person must have that 50% of the market value
Right.
to pay for the freehold. And if you don't have it, and the 2 years expired, that's it. There is no more grace period. So it's kind of rough, but that is what is being recommended here.
Right.
And I guess it's for people to weigh in on these things and to impress upon their representative what they think is fair.
Right. Like we said before, the only thing what really concerns me, I like the fact, of course, like you said, it's 50% discount. You're not paying any freehold, any stamp duty on the title, etc. Again, it's just really the market value of the property, because the value of properties have actually skyrocketed in the Turks and Caicos Islands. So it's just going to be interesting to see what is that market value of that particular lot, and to see how much that discount makes a difference.
Yeah.
Right. But I guess market the prices of property in such a vibrant country where everyone is looking to invest because of all the incentives, I guess, that will comes with it. But that's something we have to look further into.
Yeah, well, you're talking about property value escalating. I remember when I bought some property years ago, I paid about $3,000. It was at 1 point something acre, right? Just over $3,000. Now, if I were to try to buy that, at today's rate, I have to pay $100,000.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't buy more
At the time.
At the time.
But at the time, that $3,000 was a lot of money.
That was a lot of money. And then you had 6 children.
Yes.
So you had to find some way of saving this money to make the purchase. But it's a sacrifice.
Yes.
At any stage of life, you have to make sacrifices
Right.
and try to use your money wisely.
Wisely. Yes. Great. Well, we've come to the end of the show. And I would just like to use this opportunity just to ask you if you have any parting words that you would want to say or anything you want to reiterate about this whole conversation. This is your opportunity to do so.
Yes, well, I certainly enjoy this time. It's been a while since I, was anywhere in the public eyes. And this is a topic I think that is of interest to everyone. The acquisition of a piece of crown land, whether for residential or commercial purposes. These recommendations, they're here, and I would, as you said, encourage persons to find a copy, go online, take a read of the recommendations, begin with that first, make your points, and if you don't agree with some of it, or you have some better ideas how things might be implemented, get on to your representative or send it in to the government. Let them know, well, I think you should look at this or look at that when you're going to make your conclusion. But I would like to encourage every Turks and Caicos Islander to try to do their utmost to see if you could own a piece of Turks and Caicos. I think that is your God-given right to own a piece, and make every effort to ensure that you and your descendants own a piece of the Turks and Caicos Islands.
Yeah, I think that's a good note on, like you said, where to close out on making sure that you own a piece of Turks and Caicos Islands. That's something I try to tell to, persons I come in contact with all the time. And not from a crown land standpoint, but even from a private sales standpoint, prices are increasing, and each time a customer comes, they continue to say, well, prices are increasing. I said, yeah, but if you don't get it now, it's going to go higher. Right. A couple of months ago, I said, but the main thing is, you know what, even if you can find that particular property in that ideal location that you're looking for, whatever you can afford, invest with that amount, because all property has value, and you will find some use for that particular property. And right now, properties are really, I think, at a more reasonable price on the outer islands. And just as Providenciales is beautiful, all the other islands are beautiful.
That's true.
And investment is going to spread to those islands, and you don't want to be left behind. So I think that's a very good opportunity. Get a piece of Providence, of Turks and Caicos, while you can. And don't just depend on the crown land, but see what you can do for yourself.
That is a valid point, and I'll give you a practical example. Years ago, when I worked with Scotiabank at Grand Turk, I didn't see myself coming to Providenciales. And a good friend of mine, Stanley Williams, he had access to some information where land was being sold in glass shack at reasonable rates. In fact, you only had to pay down so much money, and then you pay so much amount until you pay it off. So he was trying to tell me, man, pay down a couple of pieces of these lots, man. I said, man, I'm not going to Provo. I'm not going to go down there. Say, but look at it as an investment. I must say he tried.
Right.
But I didn't bite. I sorry I didn't. But later on, an opportunity came, where some land was available, in Long Bay, that I made that purchase then, as I said, about $3,000 for the lot. But anywhere you could acquire some land, right? Get it on any island, because it is going to appreciate in value.
Yes.
And if you can't develop it in your lifetime, hopefully they don't put through this land tax. Your descendants would be able to at least have some property with which to do something with. in the future.
Right. And just for the record, your $3,000 lot now, if that's 1 acre, that's probably value over $200,000.
Oh my goodness.
So that's how values have increased.
Wow.
But yes, let's invest in the Turks and Caicos Islands for ourselves, for our future generation. So as always, I like to say to my listening audience, I appreciate you tuning in. Please don't forget, like and share the page. And don't let this just be the end of you, thinking about what's going on in the Turks and Caicos Islands about the Crown Land Review. Please go online. It's on the government page. And if you can't find it there, for sure the link is on my Facebook page, Vernica Delancey. Take a look at that document, and like Honorable Selva has said, the recommendations are laid out in a summary at the beginning and I think at the end. Start with that. See which recommendation spark your interest, and then go into the details of looking to see what that is all about. Don't wait until it's passed and then you have no say in the game. At least have an opportunity to see what's coming, or if there's something you feel like it's not appropriate. So with that said, I want to say to you, have a very good evening and see you next time. Until then, stay safe and remain blessed.
The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed on this show belong solely to Let's Talk TCI Real Estate and not that of Keller Williams TCI or any of its affiliates. Any action you take upon the information provided on this show is strictly at your own risk, and Let's Talk TCI Real Estate guests or hosts will not be liable for any losses and damages in connection with the use of the material. I am not an investment advisor, broker, or dealer.